She didn't scream. She didn't insult you. She didn't slam doors or make a scene. She whispered. She smiled. She said, "I'm fine," with a voice so cold, it froze the room. That's how emotional violence starts. Quiet, untraceable, and you, trying to be a good man, missed it, because she wasn't like the others. She listened. She asked how your day was. She let you cry once, and that was enough for you to believe she was safe, that she was the one. That finally, someone saw you. But she didn't want to see you. She wanted to study you. She wanted to know what broke you, so she could keep you there. And you gave her the map. You told her about your past, your father, your fears, your ex who manipulated you. You thought vulnerability would create intimacy, but it didn't. It created leverage. She didn't love your soul. She loved how easily she could access it. She began to show up exactly when you were about to walk away. She could feel it. The moment you regained strength, she'd become soft again. Her touch would return. Her eyes would water. Her voice would tremble. And she'd say, "I don't want to lose you." Not because she loved you, because she was losing control. You see, she didn't fall for the strong version of you. She got attached to the broken one, to the man who doubted himself, to the boy still hoping that one day, someone would stay. So every time you tried to become whole, she'd disappear, or fight, or accuse you of being distant. And you believed her, because she spoke with such conviction, because her tone was soft, because no one else had ever looked at you like that. But it wasn't love, it was possession. It was a silent war, and you didn't even know you were in it. You just felt tired, anxious, numb, but you called it stress, work, life, because she wasn't yelling at you. She wasn't cheating. She wasn't leaving. She was just withdrawing. Affection became currency. Her attention, a reward. Her silence, a punishment. You stopped asking questions. You stopped bringing up how her absence made you feel. You stopped sharing when something hurt, because every time you did, she made it about her. You'd say, "This hurt me," and she'd reply, "Why are you always attacking me?" And you'd sit there, confused, wounded, apologizing for your pain. That's when you began to shrink. To avoid conflict, you lowered your voice. You chose your words like walking on glass. You stopped dreaming out loud. You stopped laughing the same. You began editing yourself just enough to keep her from drifting away. But she drifted anyway. Because it was never about who you were. It was about how broken she could make you feel. And the more broken you became, the safer she felt. It's hard to admit that someone you loved fed on your wounds. Not because she was evil, but because she was empty. Because your pain gave her meaning. Because your confusion made her feel powerful. And the scariest part, it looked like love. To your friends. To your family. Even to you. Because the manipulation was never loud. It was measured. Gentle. It came in quiet corrections. Slight sighs. Faint glances of disapproval. And worst of all, the withdrawal of warmth at your most vulnerable moments. That's not love. That's grooming. And now you see it. You see how every "I'm just tired" meant you're too much. How every "I don't feel like talking" meant your feelings don't matter. How every "you're over" meant I refuse to take responsibility. But back then, you believed it. Because believing her was easier than admitting the truth. She never wanted to love you. She just wanted to break you gently. You didn't even notice it at first. How she started correcting your memories. "That's not how it happened," she'd say. Or, "You're being dramatic." And because you respected her, you questioned yourself. Maybe you were remembering wrong. Maybe your tone really was too much. Maybe you were just tired. That's how it begins. The rewriting, the distortion, the erosion of your reality. And it doesn't happen with force. It happens with softness. With raised eyebrows, with "Are you okay?" asked in a tone that feels more like accusation than concern. She didn't need to control your body. She controlled the narrative. And soon you were living in hers. You started narrating your life through her lens. If she was cold, you wondered what you did wrong. If she was kind, you felt relief, not love. You weren't in a relationship. You were in a performance. One where your role was to make sure she never felt uncomfortable. And that meant you had to carry everything. Your guilt, your pain, her silence. You became fluent in emotional code. Reading between lines. Translating her sighs. Interpreting her moods. You stopped being honest. Not because you wanted to lie, but because telling the truth cost too much. Every time you opened up, she made you pay. With distance, with withdrawal, with accusations of being too much. And so, you quieted. You smiled when you were hurt. You nodded when you wanted to scream. You apologized for wounds you didn't cause. That's how it works. Not with violence. With confusion. With slow, silent self-abandonment. You began to miss yourself. Not just your laugh, your mind, your clarity, your energy, your voice. And when you tried to speak about it, she turned it around. "I'm always the villain," she'd say, or "You never appreciate me." And so, once again, you were the one explaining, begging, shrinking, and the worst part, you thought this was love. Because love, to you, always came with suffering. That's what they taught you. That real love hurts. That if you're struggling, it must be meaningful. That heartbreak is proof of depth, but it's not. Heartbreak is sometimes just the proof that someone never loved you right? That they loved what you gave, what you offered, what you endured, but not you. not your truth, not your stillness. And now you know. You know that when someone makes you doubt yourself consistently, that's not miscommunication, that's manipulation. When someone makes you afraid to speak, that's not compatibility, that's control. When someone disappears emotionally the moment you ask for connection, that's not just how they are, that's punishment. And you're not crazy for feeling it, you're not sensitive, you're not needy, you're awake. And that awareness is terrifying, because it means you stayed too long, that you excused too much, that you confused trauma with love. But don't shame yourself. You weren't weak, you were loyal. You weren't stupid, you were hopeful. And now, you're done. Not with her, with the cycle. The cycle of explaining, apologizing, proving, the cycle of waiting for someone to change when they've shown you who they are 1,000 times. You're not angry, you're not bitter, you're just done. Because peace is louder than performance. And your silence now is not submission, it's survival. You thought walking away would be the hardest part, but it wasn't. The hardest part was realizing how much of yourself you lost trying to keep her. You stopped laughing without thinking. You stopped dreaming out loud. You stopped being spontaneous because everything became a calculation. Will this upset her? Will she withdraw again? Will she twist this into something it's not? You lived like a hostage in your own mind. Careful, quiet, composed. You weren't thriving. You were surviving. And when you finally left, there was no applause, no closure, just silence. And in that silence came the grief, not for her, but for the version of you who tolerated it all. The you who called chaos passion, who called withdrawal space, who called manipulation misunderstanding. You mourned him because he tried, because he believed, because he stayed long enough to be unrecognizable. That's what this kind of love does. It doesn't just hurt, it rewires you. Until you're unsure if you're kind, or just afraid. Until you can't tell if you're growing, or just adapting to abuse. Until love starts to feel like anxiety in disguise, and when it's over, you don't feel free. You feel lost, because you built your identity around being the fixer. The one who absorbs, the one who stays. And without her chaos, you don't know what to hold anymore, but slowly you begin to see. You see the mornings are quieter. You see your body breathing again. You see your mind resting. You see that love should not feel like a test. It should not feel like walking on glass. It should not feel like begging for scraps of kindness. And you begin to remember who you were before her, before the confusion, before the explanations, before the ache that never left your chest. You were not weak. You were not broken. You were wide open. You were honest. You were trying, and she couldn't hold that. Not because you were too much, but because you were real. And real love terrifies people who are hiding from themselves. She didn't break you. She exposed what you hadn't healed. She mirrored your unworthiness. And now, you're facing it. Without her, and that's the work. Not hating her. Not proving anything. Just remembering who you were before the performance. Reclaiming the parts you silenced. Rebuilding the home within. And knowing this, you never have to bleed to be loved. Again, you still think about her, not because you miss her, but because part of you still wants to understand. How could someone say they loved you, and still break you so quietly? You replay the moments. Her smile when you cried. Her silence when you reached out. Her soft tone when she blamed you for everything. And you wonder, was any of it real? The truth. Some of it was. That's what makes it dangerous. She held you when you needed it. She looked at you like you were everything. She whispered dreams into your ear. But the same hands that held you also pushed you away. The same eyes that adored you watched you unravel. And she did nothing, because her love had limits. It had terms, it had fine print. You had to be soft, but not too emotional, strong but not threatening, present but never demanding. The moment you needed too much, she disappeared, or turned it around. You're too sensitive, you're reading into things. I can't do this right now. And you apologized again. Because your biggest fear wasn't being wrong, it was being abandoned. And she knew that. She didn't love you despite your wounds. She loved you because of them, because they made you quiet, compliant, predictable. She never had to face herself. As long as you kept facing your reflection through her. But now, you're turning away. Not toward someone new, but toward yourself. And it's disorienting. Because the silence feels empty. The peace feels boring. The stability feels fake. But that's just withdrawal. Withdrawal from chaos? From high highs and low lows? From chasing validation? From earning love? You're detoxing, and like any detox it hurts. You start to see how much you tolerated. How many times you silenced yourself. How many days you walked on eggshells, calling it love. And then comes the anger. Not at her, at you. For staying, for explaining, for ignoring your gut. But that anger isn't your enemy. It's your signal. That your soul is waking up. That your boundaries are rebuilding. That your voice is returning. Because now, you don't need someone to tell you you're worthy. You feel it. Not every day. Not all the time, but enough to know you're not going back. Not to her, not to who you were with her. Not to the performance. You're done being palatable. You're done begging. You're done breaking yourself down so someone else can feel whole. From now on, if love asks you to shrink, it's not love. If connection costs you your peace, it's not connection. If intimacy silences you, it's not intimacy. You see it now. And because you see it, you're free. She never hit you. She never shouted. She never left bruises on your body, but your spirit. That's where the bruises lived. Invisible, lingering, and worst of all, dismissed. Because when people asked, what happened, you had no words. How do you explain that? She broke you with pauses, with silence, with withholding. How do you say? She looked away when I needed her eyes the most. Or she smiled while my heart was collapsing. You can't. So you say nothing. You pretend it wasn't that bad. You protect her, even now, because you were trained to protect the people who hurt you. You were told, she's just going through something. She's trying her best. Maybe you're overreacting, but you're not overreacting. You're remembering. You're remembering the nights you stayed up wondering why love felt like fear, why every time she got close, it hurt, why every time you reached for her, she flinched, or froze, or vanished, and then blamed you. You're too intense. You're overthinking. You're making a big deal out of nothing. So you stopped speaking, not because you had nothing to say, but because your voice was never safe. And silence became your protection, your shield, your prison. That's what emotional abuse does. It rewrites your instincts. It teaches you that your needs are a threat, that your feelings are too much, that love is something you must earn. And now, you're unlearning all of it, slowly, painfully, honestly. You're reteaching your nervous system that calm isn't boring, that peace isn't suspicious, that love can come without a price. It's not easy. You miss the intensity, the hype, the fire, but you also remember the crash, the ache, the emptiness. She made you addicted to the chase. Not because she loved you, but because that's all she knew. Love to her was power. It was possession. It was about keeping you close. Enough to need her, but far enough to keep you insecure. And you played along, not because you're weak, but because you loved her. And loving someone doesn't mean you were meant to stay. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is leave. And you did. Maybe not all at once, but eventually. And now, you sit in the aftermath, with your thoughts, your heart, your truth, and it's heavy, but it's yours. No more explaining. No more performing. No more waiting for someone to give you what you've always deserved. From now on, you choose you, every time. Without apology, you stopped needing answers. Not because you got closure, but because you realized she wouldn't give it. Not because she couldn't, but because giving you peace meant losing control, and control was everything to her. That's why the fights never ended with truth. That's why every apology felt unfinished. That's why even in silence, you were still confused. Because confusion was the leash. She didn't need to scream. All she had to do was make you doubt yourself. And you did. For weeks, for months, for years. You doubted your memory, your tone, your sensitivity. You started looking at yourself through her eyes. Always too much, always wrong. And now, you're shedding that image, slowly, like skin that doesn't fit anymore. You're starting to see yourself clearly, not as a burden, but as a man who gave everything. Your presence, your loyalty, your soul. And still, it wasn't enough. Not because you weren't enough, but because she never wanted love. She wanted control. She wanted the feeling of being needed, and the moment you didn't need her, she punished you. With distance, with silence, with the coldest type of rejection, withdrawal without reason, and you chased, not because you were desperate, but because you still believed in the good moments. The laughter, the tears, the promises whispered in the dark. But even the good moments were built on pain. You cried, and she comforted you. You broke, and she held you, but she never stopped the cycle, because your breakdowns kept her relevant, and your healing threatened her role. So she kept you hurting, lovingly, quietly, strategically, and now you know that someone who truly loves you won't make you beg for clarity. They won't disappear when you ask for emotional safety. They won't withhold affection to stay in control. Love doesn't vanish when you have needs. Love leans in. Love listens. Love sees you, especially when you're not okay. And you're learning that again. You're learning that needing someone doesn't make you weak, that being vulnerable isn't a flaw, that asking for reassurance isn't manipulation, it's human. You're rebuilding your sense of normal. And yes, it's scary, because calm feels unfamiliar, because peace feels empty after chaos, because for so long, survival was your normal but not anymore. You're not surviving her anymore. You're surviving you. The version of you who thought pain was proof of love. The version of you who made himself smaller to keep someone else comfortable. The version of you who forgot his own worth. And that version is fading, slowly, quietly, permanently, because this time, the silence is yours. And it's healing. You don't hate her. That's the surprising part. After everything, after the silence, the confusion, the slow destruction of your self-worth, you don't hate her, because hating her would mean she still owns space in your heart. And you've taken it back. Not with rage, with clarity, with stillness, with the quiet power of someone who finally sees. You see how it all fit together. The praise, the withdrawal, the moments of affection followed by coldness. You see how she danced just close enough to keep you hoping, but never close enough to stay. You see how every apology was a reset button, not a promise of change. You see how every time you healed a little, she'd find a new way to make you bleed. And now, you're done bleeding. You're done guessing. You're done performing. You're done loving people who don't know how to hold a heart without breaking it. You walk differently now. Not heavier, lighter, because you're not carrying the weight of being misunderstood. You're not carrying the guilt of leaving. You're not carrying the shame of staying. You're carrying yourself whole, honest, awake, and no, it's not perfect. Healing isn't linear. There are still echoes, still dreams, still moments where her voice shows up in your thoughts. But now, you answer back. You remind yourself who you are, what you've survived, what you'll never accept again. This wasn't just a breakup. It was a rebirth of your truth, your boundaries, your value. She didn't take that from you. She revealed how much you had abandoned it, and now, it's yours again. You're not waiting for love. You're becoming it. You're not chasing peace. You're living it. You're not looking for someone to fill you. You're overflowing. And the next time someone comes into your life, they'll have to meet you here, in this place of wholeness, where silence isn't fear, it's presence. Where love isn't control, it's clarity. Where connection doesn't come with punishment, it comes with truth. You don't hate her, you're grateful. Because now you know what you'll never go back to. And that knowing that is freedom.